Hello everyone. We are going to focus on the European charter market over the coming year, presented by some of your superwomen in private aviation. I'm Emily Williams. I'm co-founder and director of a business called IW Aviation. We're a totally independent private aviation advisory that's been going for about 5 years, working globally. And I'm going to hand you over. Everyone say a quick hello, and then we will focus on some of the key questions that are relevant to all the businesses up here and hopefully to many of you.
Well, I'm Tanya Raynes. Until about a year ago, I was the CEO of the operator Centerline. Since then, I've moved into the role of non-exec chair for Pula Aviation Services, which is the aviation group that's the parent to Centerline.
Good morning. I'm Eugène. I'm the managing director of Flexjet in Europe, and I've been in the industry since 2002.
Hello everyone, I'm Julie Black from Hunt & Palmer, where I head up our European Charter Division. I'm also the Deputy Chair of the Air Charter Association.
Hi, I'm Michelle McMullan. I'm the Charter Sales Manager for Air Charter Scotland, and I've been in the industry since 2011.
So I'll probably kick off with the sort of broadest and most frequently asked question. Everyone says the European charter market is really declining across the board. It's a really unexciting cycle of small ups and small downs, but are there pockets of opportunity in there? And Maureen, I'm going to kick off with you on that front.
Yeah, thank you, Em. I think if we all look diligently at Richard's from Wings data every month, it can be a little bit of a blindsiding exercise to look at those trends on the macro level. I think we all have to look at what's happening in Europe for the past 12 months, and it's not been a very exciting picture. I think it's fair to say that the market is on the soft side. But for those of us, and there are many of us in the room who've been here for many decades, that's nothing new. If you look at what happened over the past 10 years, really, it's been a succession of slightly up, slightly down. So overall, stable. And if you then look at the macro level, Europe is holding up. It's the second largest private aviation market in the world after the US. It's maturing. And when you look at the granularity of the data, and when you really look at what's happening, we've seen some very encouraging trends. We've seen some evolution as well in our industry that I think show resilience and grit of our market. I'm thinking, for example, of the fact that we've seen tremendous new aircraft coming to the market in Europe and being adopted by our customers. We've seen, new light jets coming in, super light, super mid-size aircraft, development of long-range flying. And those are like the signal for sure that our marketplace is maturing. And that provides a great space of opportunities for us. I also think, for example, of what we've heard since yesterday. Our customers really are looking for more comfort. We have seen users who had discovered the perk and the benefits of flying private on probably some light jet aircraft, now adopting mid-size, super mid-cabin, wanting to have that extra comfort. And that's a sure sign of opportunity, resilience, and I think we need to look at the granularity really behind the big trend. The macro level can be a bit despairing, but when you look at what's happening, it shows tremendous opportunity for all of us.
Jules, have you got anything to add to that, especially with your backer hat on as well as your broker hat?
Yeah, Charter Association now. I think that typically the market is, it's up one week, it's down the next. The only thing I would say is that it's really not predictable anymore. With all the sort of global political and economic uncertainty that we all face in every market, something that was a strength one week will be a weakness the next. And as a broker, I'm no closer to be able to predict that. And with my Air Charter Association hat on, all I can say is that our members are looking to their professionals alongside them to try and get them through the bumps in the road, to get some pricing standardisation across the board so that we can all stay in business for longer to get through those bumps in the road, whether they be seasonal or on a longer economic cycle.
And Michelle, I think you mentioned that you're bucking the trend on this one, so...
in this last year, we've had our most profitable year since 2012, so we've not seen the decline that everybody else keeps talking about, which is great. But like Jill says, I don't think we can predict what's going to happen after. We don't want to talk about it, but Brexit. I think that we just have to keep going and keep trying to push for the increase in aircraft sales and encouraging people to charter more as well.
Yeah, well, I think agreeing with Michelle, despite the stats that are out there for us, the summer was still a very strong season in terms of demand, and actually, you know, against the stats, it was the light jet market that really showed some very strong demand for us. I think one of the changes we've seen is in the lower demand, in the winter season, perhaps the demand there, it's a stronger seasonal effect. And some of that is around the earlier winter months. We're seeing more long haul compared to historically, with the ski season being pushed out to the later winter months. So, you know, again, there is opportunity there, but perhaps it's a slightly bigger differential between the winter and summer months. And I think the main opportunity that's out there for all of us as operators or brokers of aircraft is you don't always want to be the first to fly. So pick when you want to be the first to fly and when you don't want to be the first to fly.
So undoubtedly there's healthy competition in the market despite some of these doom and gloom trends. There's more operators, more choices for the end users, and more broker competition as well. So there's an increased focus on price point. Is this driving the market down, and how are you tackling things like that, Michelle?
I think for us, being an operator, we are a service provider to our owners, to the end users, and what we have to do is we have to look at what strategy works for us. Yes, we could go down a pricing route, however, that wouldn't allow us to provide the best service for our owners and our charter requirements. First and foremost, we have to look after our owners. They own the assets, and that's what we have to do. If we want to adopt a price-driven model, like a lot of operators are doing, that obviously works for them, but from what's happened in the last year, especially with Air Charter Scotland, we know that our model, it's working for us. We don't always focus on the price. We could, but we tend to find that service, reputation, that's what works for us, and that's what will bring people back to you as the operator, including your owners.
Well, and the room is agreeing really loudly with us. So that's great.
And what do you think those added levels of service are that you can provide so that you can increase margin, be profitable, but also offer a sustainable operation? And I might add to that the sort of theme that's been over the last day or two, you know, about emissions and things. So adding that and building that into your pricing structure.
Sure. Obviously, we are aware that this is a big issue. So we are looking at our carbon emissions and part of all those programmes. But I think for us, we have to look after the asset. That's the main thing. And our customers, it's a customer-driven industry. As an operator, I think investing in the people that work for you and providing the service not just to the end user, your passengers, but also to the brokers and the people that work, the nice point of contacts, your good operations teams, just really providing the best level of service that you can.
And Jules, that's probably, you've got a double whammy because you've got to deal with the operator pricing, but also the broker pricing. So how do you tackle that?
By trying to stay calm more often than not. I think keep calm and don't panic. So often, and we'll talk a little bit about commoditization just slightly further down the line in this session, but people are trying to make it so much about price. And as a broker, I haven't invested the millions of dollars in airframes. I'm not trying to look after high maintenance owners. My asset is basically the people that I employ and the relationships that they build with our client base, but also with our supplier base, good operators like many of you in the room. So the service element can never be undersold, and I really hope that that is something that is continued to be appreciated by both sides of the transaction.
Let's move on to the next question now. So there's a lot of talk about the sharing economy going on at the moment. And this has changed, obviously, the dynamic of pricing over the last couple of years. So how do you manage charter sales? I'm going to direct this particularly at you, Tanya. And how has that impacted your model and your diversification of your business?
Thanks. I mean, I think referring back to sort of a previous question where we talked about operators and managing profitability, pricing pressure has been in the market for quite some time now. We all operate in a low margin environment. And the reality is there are many operators out there who aren't profitable. They maybe work to a different model. In fact, I think Al in the CJI News in December very cheerfully said that Exclusive Jet is unlikely to be the only operator that stops flying during this winter. That's the reality of it. But I think we view the sharing economy as a very positive thing in terms of bringing new customers into the market. There is a pricing element that could come into that, but actually the positive is the more customers, the higher the demand, the better the pricing pressure should be. So we view that as a very positive thing. I think the main impacts that we're seeing are from, say, the one-way seat pricing that's occurring in the low demand months. So that's a lot of that coming from Air Hamburg, from Vista. That certainly has an impact. Another major impact is from the new entrants that maybe are coming in and they're pricing to gain market share. That's part of the cost of customer acquisition. But that cost also then has a knock-on impact to everyone else in the market because it obviously influences overall pricing levels. But alongside all of those dynamics that are going on externally, as an operator, I think particularly as a smaller operator, then actually the factors that influence how you price any particular job, and certainly a group of jobs, doesn't really change. So there's always external dynamics that you're monitoring that are affecting your business, that are having both a positive and negative effect. But internally, you still have to manage how many aircraft you've got, the homogeneity of your fleet, crew availability and suitability, owner release, owner requirements for charter. I mean, again, we have a managed fleet as opposed to an owned fleet, and that comes with its own set of internal dynamics that don't actually change irrespective of the external market to any great extent. So it really for us always comes back to that yield management model, which is what Michelle was referring to earlier. You need great service, but you also need to treat your inquiries, your demand levels, as it's not a sausage factory. Each and every inquiry needs to be responded to wisely, really, taking into account current demand, what's the competitor activity, close relationships with your broker. And they will have such a close understanding of what's happening, so you can choose which jobs you want to pitch for at what price point. Make margins, make hay while the sun shines on your margins, and then accept that at other times maybe it's not going to be so easy, but over the course of a year there are profits to be made.
And as an operator, how do you feel that broker relationship has evolved more recently, and where do you see the future from an operator's perspective?
I mean, for us, it remains such a key part of what we do for business. Our main customer are the major brokers that we work with. From the broker's point of view, they need to work with operators as much as they can, where they trust what the operator will do. They know that when they put that out to the operator, it's a partnership. Everyone is there to make it happen seamlessly for the customer, and everyone ends up winning. So, I mean, our aim as an operator, and I'm sure Michelle would agree with this, is that if price was not a factor, that broker would choose you as an operator each and every time.
Yeah. I'm going to jump onto one of the questions that was here a moment ago. And Maureen, I'm going to direct this to you about, particularly as you look to launch now in Europe, I think there was a question about apps, booking. How is that sort of evolving in the market? Is that something you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean,
there we go. There's the question for you.
Definitely. I mean, Flexjet has a very nice app that our owners are using constantly over there in the US. I think you want to provide ease of access, but you don't want to impact the personalization of the service. I think you have to provide options to your customer, but you have to stay very tuned to what they're asking. We clearly are not a program that's looking at making an automated process for booking to then be able to say, well, productivity per head, that means we need less people over the phone to look after our customer. On the contrary, we're the exact opposite. You want to give the option to the customers to then do whatever they want. But our owners really enjoy a high level of personalization of service. So I don't see the app as a substitute. I see it as an extra value service.
And Jules, this is obviously the most important question for you about this broker relationship, but also this added piece about apps. And how do you see that interaction evolving? I mean, you're super experienced in this area.
She's saying I'm old. Been around a long time, seen a few things. I think that you can never replace the humanity of what we do. frankly. You know, we're operating at the very top end of the customer service industry. It's such a teeny tiny portion of the population can ever afford to set foot on a private jet. And when they do it because they absolutely have to, or they absolutely want to. Two very different, but nonetheless, no less compelling reasons to spend thousands of pounds getting from A to B when in some cases there's a different or cheaper or slightly slower way of doing it. So we have to justify ourselves in the service and the price. So, you know, your airframes have got to look clean and tidy. Your crew have got to turn up not looking like they're falling in a hedge on the way to work. The catering is expected to be a little bit more than a few curly sandwiches. And people want professionalism, proactive problem solving from their broker. I kind of want to take this a little bit back to a question I saw earlier, which was something along the lines of, can the charter price come up again? And I want to put that back to the operators and say, that's back down to you guys. You know, we're all here to learn something at this conference. And for me, I think the way that we can get charter rates to rise is for you to sell your product at its true value. And, you know, with the sort of floating fleet and transient models that we have now, people, the end user is no longer really truly appraised of what the real monetary value is of what they're buying, and they're looking to drive pricing down, and as brokers we're kind of caught in the middle of that often. We're all chasing the same aeroplanes, and you know, I love it when operators are willing to draw a line in the sand and keep that price up. And you know, we can all do this, and we need to get it back to people paying the true value of what it costs to operate that aeroplane from A to B.
So that leads us nicely onto the commoditization of the market, something that people throw around as a concept quite a lot. What does that actually mean, and what are your views on that?
Well, obviously, a true definition of commoditization is making it all about price, and the very notion of what we do should be more about service than price. But the true value needs to be appreciated. So, you know, so often I find myself competing, chasing the same aircraft, you know, going after Michelle's aircraft or Tanya's, and I've got 4 or 5 other brokers chasing my tail, and it's very easy to become a race to the bottom, which is pretty horrific situation for everybody to be in. And I think that the most important thing here is to, as I say, to keep pricing up, help people to realise the true value and to appreciate the service, to appreciate the broker that will think ahead about their requirements at the airport, their preferred FBOs, what support they might need, what preferred catering they want, whether it be Marmite Twiglets or something equally horrendous. But also to demonstrate our value back to our operating partners as well. You know, I hear many stories through my role in the Air Charter Association about some questionable broker conduct with people selling at net, selling below net, and going back to try and renegotiate just to line their own pockets. And I don't think that's ethical. You know, I would never do that, and I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should be open with each other, and we should work to win business together to keep these customers coming back. I mean, the most competition I ever faced in a job was 20 brokers. And at 20, you might think, how on earth is that ever going to be about anything other than price? I'm not going to big myself up when I say I won the business, but I did win the business simply through proving to that client that I had the knowledge and the experience to help them deliver a very unique charter project. I did not win it through capitulation on price. And there's a lesson in that for all of us.
Michelle, how do you tackle pricing? Particularly, I know that you deal with a lot of the end users directly as well as brokers.
Yeah, I would say obviously like 90% of our business is through like the major charter brokers, same as Tanya. It is a tricky situation to deal with, like Jules says, the amount of times that you get the same request from 4, 5, 6 and the PA, and how you deal with that, maintaining your relationships. Like Jules says, it should be more of a partnership between operators and brokers. I think a lot of education needs to come into it, like just backing up what Julie says. There is brokers that will come and try and undercut at the end, and as operators we also need to stick together and say, no, like this is the price, we can't do anything, there's no point. It's got to the stage where I've turned around and says, like, I can't do anything else on it, it would cost me money to now operate this flight, and we need to walk away at that stage. If other operators, if that's what they want to do, that's absolutely up to them, but like Jill says, we need to keep the prices high, just because we are providing such a unique service.
So Michelle and Tanya, let's just tackle this question and then we'll move into the kind of fractional space. So someone's asked today, it's cheaper to charter an aircraft than operating an owner-owned aircraft. How long do you, as an owner-operator, see surviving? Let's just tweak that for a bit of grammar, but you know the general gist.
I mean, we've been around for years, and this has always been our business model. We've owned the odd aircraft, but that's never been the flagship. So I don't see how that would really have an impact on us, because we've proved it last year. We just need to keep making money and deciding how we do this. Our main focus is always on the owner, managing their asset, and as long as we are keeping our customers happy, that's how long I see us surviving for.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will always be people out there that want to own aircraft. And for some of those people, they don't want to charter their aircraft. It's theirs. They want it. They might use it so much they don't need to. But there are also plenty of other owners out there who they're not looking to make a profit on their aircraft. They want to work with a good management company who will reduce their cost of ownership. You know, that's what the program is. It's a reducing cost of ownership. So I think when you reach the point where actually it's losing money to operate a flight, you as the operator and manager of that aircraft would be doing a disservice to your customer unless they had specifically requested you for sometimes good reason to do that. But actually the model of someone owning an aircraft that they maybe only want to use a certain number of hours a year and they want to justify having an aircraft because they want one, then actually it still makes sense for them. There are plenty of other models out there that is a risk within the market and a competitive risk, but actually the model remains robust.
So let's tackle some of the program questions as well. So fractional programs have grown from ground zero to 20% in the European market just within the last 2 decades. Are they here to stay, and can they benefit the users and the wider industry alike? And that's obviously at Marine.
Well, that's an obvious yes for me. I mean, I remember, and you do too, 20 years ago, I have to say the skepticism and the cynicism over all of the industry as fractional arrived in Europe. And I remember being on the French side of the channel, being told repeatedly, this is an American concept, it'll never work over here. Well, it has worked. It has worked, and I'm still surprised, quite frankly. Occasionally, I still meet representative of our industry saying to me, but fractional doesn't work in Europe, does it? It does work. It's 20%. I mean, when I mean fractional membership, lease, but overall, it is 20% of the market. And that segment has done a tremendous good to the industry. If you think the combined marketing budget of all the key players in the field worldwide, how much they are attracting new entrants to this category, something that we heard yesterday in David's presentation in the morning, in the opening, they are really bringing new users to this field. I was thinking and reflecting upon this. I must have met like over 1,500 people in the course of my career. I clearly didn't sign 1,500 deals. And a lot of the people that we spoke to end up using charter, end up buying their own aircraft. There's a fair amount of, going up and down from the food chain, but it is a very healthy segment, as we heard also from this morning from Richard's presentation on safety, for the overall health of the industry. And it's one that's bringing new aircraft type to the market. And talking of commoditization of price, this is the one segment where I'd say customers are a little less focused on price. They want budget transparency, they want budget predictability, they want something that's reasonable, they want value for money, but it's not about negotiating the price on every flight. So I think it's really a sector that has done a lot of good for the industry. I'm excited to be part of it. I've been part of it for nearly 2 decades, and I see it continuously growing. That being said, there'll be space for absolutely everyone, no doubt. Not everyone is a fractional customer, and there is definitely space for charter, fraction, and full ownership.
And I think that's an interesting question. Sorry, I was going to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say that I couldn't agree more. The fractional space has brought a lot of new entrants to the charter market as well, and many savvy business aviation users are using a whole sort of plethora of combinations. I work with some big corporate flight department clients who have their own owned assets. They have some fractional shares, and then they also use charter. And there's obviously certain areas where if you're in fractional, your deal is in a certain region or in a certain cabin category, and sometimes your need is outside of that. So actually it's just part of a diverse portfolio of products which is forming all part of our lovely business aviation world.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you, as we've built our business on that. There's a question here about flight sharing, which I think also applies to fractional, aircraft sharing. Has that really affected the European charter market yet? If not, do you think it's going to affect it soon?
Was that sharing or shaming?
Flight shaming. I thought it said flight sharing. Well, let's ignore that then. We'll move on. Let's talk about aircraft types, because I've seen quite a few questions coming up. So there's one here. What is the most sellable aircraft for charter in Europe? WingX, Richard, the genius with this data, has come up with some really interesting comments on this. So in 2019, in Europe, we saw an increase of almost 14% in worldwide departures on the super mid, but it still remains the smallest cabin type in terms of departures in Europe. So what do you see as the most sellable aircraft in the market? Bit of inside investment advice for anyone looking at buying a plane.
I mean, a quarter of our fleet is super mid-size. We've got a Latitude and 2 Legacy 500s. So I've not seen that, but we're just bucking the trend, obviously. So I think that the Latitude is, for me, the most sellable aircraft. It's just so diverse. It's got the amazing performance. It's got the great cabin, the flat floor. And I think it's so nice to see the new types coming on and being welcomed by passengers and owners as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we certainly still have plenty of people who are interested in the light jet market, but I guess historically we see owners maybe transitioning from being fairly long-term charter clients to being a light jet owner to being maybe a larger aircraft owner in years to come. What we've seen more recently is having charter customers of light jets immediately entering the market into a super mid, with wanting to both own and charter those aircraft. So whether that means they're the most sellable aircraft, I don't think so. I think it just means that that's what the owners would like to fly on. But I guess by definition, the fact they're wanting to fly on those probably implies there's an increasing demand for others to want to fly on those, given they were originally the light jet customers. And their budget hasn't particularly changed. Their wealth, for the particular owners that I'm thinking of, their wealth didn't change between being a light jet charterer and a super mid owner.
Maureen, any comments on that?
Yeah, I really believe that we've seen this move of customer embracing larger aircraft, and we might not know yet what's the most sellable aircraft in Europe. I mean, it's changed many times over the past 2 decades, and the reference keep changing, and new entrants are becoming the superstar of the market, which is exciting, which again shows that there are definitely pockets for growth and opportunity over here. We all remember, like 8 years ago, there was not that many super mid flying in Europe, and today, as you said, Michelle, the legacies are a superstar, the challengers are working very well. I mean, it's definitely moving.
And in terms of pricing, do you find it easier to defend pricing on maybe the ultra long range versus the very light jets to end users, for example?
I think that it's fairly difficult just now when it comes to the pricing, because for us, we have got an ultra-long-range aircraft. We've got such a varied mix of fleet that it's not justifying the price. It's we price fairly, and that's the way it really should be.
Go ahead, Jules, sorry.
Well, that's the key, isn't it? Because number one on the list of questions there is Avinode good or bad for the industry? And if you've got an ultra-long-range jet inquiry, number one price will not be a realistic operating price. But that's the price that the customer is often expecting. So I'll let you answer number one for yourselves, people. But I can guarantee that the real cost of operating Michelle's 7X on a London to Los Angeles will not be the real price that somebody will pay for it when they charter it from the person who comes up number one on Avinode. And that's a problem that we do somehow have to address.
I think also if you're looking at not just individual flight by flight, but more overall yield and net profit for the year for an operator, it may be flight by flight that actually maintaining the price and the margin on the super mids or the long-range jets is easier. However, with the light jets, because the cost of taking risk to nurture luck, which is part of a yield management strategy for any high utilization charter operator, then actually you can take those risks because you can afford the risk of it going wrong. Whereas with a super mid or a long range, taking those risks is quite substantial. With an enormous fleet where you're moving homogenous aircraft around all the time, then that's maybe where that stacks up. But certainly, unless you've got a very large homogenous fleet, then really that's only very feasible in the light jet end of the market.
So let's touch on a little bit on the emissions, which has been a hot topic the last 2 days. Whose responsibility is that? amongst your businesses? And do you do anything at the moment to tackle some of those issues?
I'll start and be perfectly honest, that's an accounts thing for us. My focus is purely to sell the aircraft. So I'm not in a position to really answer that or give you a decent answer.
Well, I think we're part of an ecosystem, so everyone plays a part. I mean, starting with our passengers. I've had excellent engagement with owners and customers who themselves, mandate consulting companies to come and look at how they can carbon offset not just their aviation part, but their yachts, their properties, their cars. And so you will see that customer also will tend to take more and more responsibility for it. But we play a role in providing options, working hand in hand with the manufacturer, introducing new models, making sure that you play your part in the industry in that overall ecosystem. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is a PR battle, isn't it, in many ways? We've had many points made whilst we've been here that aviation, and business aviation in particular, is hardly the largest contributor, but, we will never be able to tell anyone that what we're doing doesn't have an impact. As a brokerage, we offer a carbon offset scheme and give our flying customers the opportunity to offset what they're doing with us, and for many that's progress. I'm not saying it's the be-all and end-all of how we're going to mitigate what we do as a business going forward. And similarly, I think there's a lot of responsibility there with the OEMs, engine manufacturers, and fuel developers, and of course the major industrial nations of China and the USA.
We'll stick on the fleet for a little bit. So the European charter fleet is aging in general. And do you think customers are going to accept this? Is Europe going to go the way of the US with customers comfortable with more aged planes, do you think?
I think years ago, before the recession hit, there was a lot of newer aircraft and expectations were just set quite high, and there's maybe not been that many new aircraft purchased. Again, we've got a relatively new fleet, so we do have the older aircraft, and I think with the levels of safety, as long as you're managing the asset, then it's more an educational thing for brokers or the end users. Mm-hmm.
Kind of very much in the hands of the end user, really, and whether they're going to take a decision based on budget, which will see them with a 20-year-old aircraft, or a decision based on age, which will see them pick. Interesting, I think you'll find the oldest aircraft in Avinode is a Sabreliner down in Florida, circa 1968, so we're not going quite that bad yet.
I really believe that flying private is expensive, and that's okay. It's got to be reasonable. You've got to be transparent about your cost, but it's one of the most important discretionary expense one will do to improve the quality of their work-life balance, their productivity. And no matter how you look at it, there's no cheap way of doing it. And so customers, especially in Europe, because of the infrastructure limitation that we have, because of the tax structure, will end up paying a significant rate, whether it's an older side of the market or whether it's a fairly new aircraft. So once you've accepted this as a passenger, you really want to have the quality that you're paying for. So I see people, migrating towards newer type and wanting to have that comfort, that cabin standards, and hopefully that helps us deal with some of the commoditization debate.
There's a question here, I think, about our everyone's favorite topic, the empty legs. So why doesn't the European one-way system lag behind the US one-way system? What can we do to maximize empty legs? And is it really as big a market opportunity as people imagine?
I'll take this. I mean, we maybe sell, I would say, 75% of our empty legs, and we're always trying to optimise the fleet. So I think on one hand, it's up to the operator how we do our optimisation to get rid of the empty legs, because nobody wants their planes flying empty. But at the same time, it's not as big a market, I feel, for us, and I can't speak for everybody else. It's not as big a market as everybody thinks. And the empty legs, again, is very price-driven. So that might be one of the reasons why we've not caught on as such, because we are still trying to make a profit at the end of the day.
And it very much depends on the routes. If your aircraft are flying very much on those mainstream routes, we kind of have a sort of section of Europe where we say within that empty legs work quite well. We'll push very hard to sell them very close to the flight date. But there's always a couple of factors. One is if it ends up outside of that range or that area of Europe, it very rarely makes sense. You can calculate it's not going to make sense before the aircraft even takes off. But also, you are always susceptible to upsetting good regular customers who fly at normal charter prices, not because of the differential in price, but because if you do end up having to cancel, even though they knew that up front, it's the only reason they got a cheap price, they still get upset.
I think geographic diversity as well. One of the reasons people charter in Europe is simply because they're not doing a normal route, and so the aircraft are not flying back on regular empty leg routes. If you look at a lot of empty legs in the US, it's east-west, north-south, south-north, west-east, and that fits very well with the travel patterns for that particular continent. But I think people are going to a whole range of different places in Europe, and sometimes those empty legs don't suit so well.
So finally, we're just about to wrap up. 35 days into 2020, what's your sort of short prognosis for the charter market for the year ahead?
I feel like Mystic Meg. Who knows? I mean, what's great today has been, well, the last 2 days, it has generally felt a bit optimistic, Brexit happened and we're all still here, nothing terrible happened, the coffee still tastes good, and, we're all still here talking business, and hopefully long may it continue. I think our industry will always be having had a bit of a poke at from those outside of it, and we have to just man up and take that and understand we don't have to justify ourselves to absolutely everybody in the world, only our customers and our stakeholders. So I'm happy to keep quietly optimistic and understand that if we treat our customers and our suppliers with mutual respect, then we'll be in a better position in the market than the person who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always aware that we have to work incredibly hard and incredibly smartly to remain profitable and stay in business as an operator. But I think overall we feel optimistic, and quite often adversity brings opportunity. So I think it's, there is opportunity out there.
New aircraft types?
Yeah. Michelle, final word from you?
Just absolutely the same as Jules. I think we can all just hope for a good year and
Scottish independence.
Thank you very much, ladies.